This is a photograph from the scene of Donald Trump's inauguration following his win in the 2016 US presidential elections. In an NBC interview soon after the inauguration, Trump's advisor, Kellyanne Conway, defended the White House press secretary Sean Spicer's claim that Mr. Trump had attracted the largest audience ever to witness an inauguration. When told that that wasn't quite true, she replied airily, "Don't be so dramatic. He gave alternative facts." Almost immediately after Conway's interview, George Orwell's classic novel, 1984, spiked to #1 on Amazon. The Twitter sphere responded to this with allusions to this particular quote from the book. "The party told you to reject the evidence of your eyes and ears. It was their final, most essential command." After sales for the novel shot up by 9,500%, Penguin announced plans for a special 75,000 copy reprint of Orwell's novel. What is it about such works of fiction that resonate with people in a way that hard facts don't? How can something written in 1949 be so relevant today? Given the events happening in the US and widespread anxieties around post-truth, fake news, and political disenfranchisement, people were looking for fables and stories to make sense of and navigate this strange new landscape. Unlike abstract analysis, stories like 1984 are so powerful because they are harmonious with the way we relate to the world. They resonate with the deep core of our experience. Because even at the level of direct engagement, the world as we experience it is a narrative construction. What we call reality is more like a narrative masterpiece rather than anything objective. And I think deep down, we know this. We rationally understand how subjective our sense of the world is, but practically forget as we go about our daily lives. From the way we perceive our day unfolding to our history and politics, it's stories all the way down. That said, we need to make a distinction between allegory and deception, between stories that seek to blind us and those that enable us to navigate the world. If stories are the structure of the world, then emotions are the primary motivating force in our lives. This is not to say that data and modeling and analytics are not important. Rational thinking is deeply important, and the power of that is evident in myriad ways all around us. But what is also evident is the fallacy that what moves us to act as individuals is deep scientific rationality. We are not cold rational actors in a Newtonian universe as much as we like to believe it. It's just not how we live, it's just not how we've evolved to live. We are emotional beings inhabiting a world of mythology and stories. Antonio Damasio challenged Descartes' logical fallacy, "I think, therefore I am," in his groundbreaking work, Descartes' Error, Emotion, Reason, and the Human Brain. Damasio argued that Descartes' error comes from this dualist separation of the mind and the body, nationality and emotion. Damasio wrote that emotions and feelings are not a luxury. They are a means of communicating our states of mind to others. But they are also a way of guiding our own judgment and decisions. Emotions bring the body into a loop of reason. Now, more than ever, it is essential that we acknowledge and build on our emotional embodiment. Today, we are in a period of accelerating change and dizzying potential for both huge transformation and catastrophic failure. No wonder many of us experience feelings of overwhelm from the increasing speed and volume of information we are exposed to. The rate of change in the world around us is disorienting. Currently, the main way we analyze and talk about these complex challenges is through vast clouds of data points. Although data can look scary, it's somehow disembodied, detached from what it references. Despite the alarming warnings about climate change, it is evident that we are having trouble acting upon this disembodied data. And data, especially about the future, feels even more disembodied and distant. fMRI studies suggest that when you imagine your future self, your brain does something weird. It stops acting as if you're thinking about yourself. Instead, it operates as if you're thinking about a completely different person. This is what behavioral economists call temporal distancing. Our tendency is to want things now rather than later. Studies by Kim and Zauberman suggest that the extent to which one discounts a future event is closely linked to how far in the future it feels. That is, its temporal distance from the present. Perhaps if people were able to pre-experience the future, or if it were possible to create mental simulations of the future, that would trigger episodic memory, reducing the temporal distance from the future. Episodic memory is part of our memory that helps us remember key events of the past. Neuroscientists call this the prospective brain, whose primary function is to use past experiences to anticipate future events. And this is what I, my partner John Arden, and my colleagues at Superflux do. Our work focuses on the power of embodied stories and visceral experiences to simulate different possible futures and bring them into the present, into the here and the now, in order to catalyze an embodied engagement with the vast potential of the future. So how do we do this? It all starts with what we call sense-making, a wide-ranging process of analyzing data, watching trends, scanning emerging technologies, looking for ethnographic and anthropological insights, following intuitive hunches, exposing ourselves to new ideas and getting a sense of their emotional content, and reflecting on our own emotional responses. All of this to find what we call weak signals, those bits of the future that arrive early into the buzzing noise of the now. Finding threads of possibility in this complex chaos, and then drawing these threads out to see where they connect in order to expose the rich tapestry of what lies ahead. And that's where the real work starts, embodying the future potential in the present. But rather than explain the process, let me take you through a few projects to give you a sense of what this feels like. A project called Drone Avery, done in 2015, is prescient even today. For the project, we wanted to explore the growing potential of invisible and increasingly autonomous technologies through the lens of drones, because of the drone's dual function, a technology that has potential for good, but also great harm. Our interest was specifically on how the presence of these machines will change our lived experience of urban spaces, and what it means to interact with algorithmic intelligence. Because drones have the power to see things we can't, to go places we can't, and to do so with increasing autonomy. To understand the technology, getting our hands dirty was crucial. So we built many different drones in our studio. We gave them names, functions, and flew them, but not without difficulty. Things came loose, GPS signals glitched, drones crashed. But it was through such experimentation that we were able to construct one very experiential slice of one possible future. So now let's go to that future. Let's imagine we are living with drones like this one. It patrols the streets, often spotted in the evenings and at nights. Initially, many of us were annoyed by its low, dull hum. But then, like everything else, we got used to it. We call it the Night Watchman. Now, what if you could see the world through its eyes? See how it constantly logs every resident of our neighborhood, logging the kids who play football in the no-ball game area and marking them as statutory nuisances. And then see how it disperses this other group who are teenagers with the threat of an autonomously issued injunction. Another one is the Route Hawk, an autonomous traffic management agent. At first glance, a seemingly harmless machine with a giant LED display providing dynamic warnings to drivers, but then they multiply. They're everywhere, constantly logging traffic violations, enforcing penalties, continually searching and capturing the smallest offense. A tireless flock of automated revenue generation machines. And then there's the newsbreaker, the media drone, which feeds on our growing hunger for the very latest breaking news as they happen, constantly monitoring emergency services and social media in real time. These nimble media devices push the boundaries of what has come to be known as high-frequency journalism, Perched across the city, they whir into action as soon as a news story breaks, filming and streaming in real time. Story writing algorithms pass imagery, audio, web, and radio traffic into rapidly growing and continually edited column inches. And then there's this giant hovering disk called the medicine. Its glaring presence is so overpowering, I can't help but stare at it. But it feels like each time I look at it, it knows a little more about me. Like it keeps flashing all these adverts from Brian Air, as if it knows about the holiday I'm planning. I'm not sure if I find this mildly entertaining or just entirely invasive. Whilst drones like Madison and Night Watchman in these particular forms are not real yet, most elements of our drone future are in fact very real today. For example, facial recognition systems are everywhere, in our phones, in our smart gadgets, and in public city infrastructure everywhere. Constantly keeping a record of everything we do, whether it's an advertisement we glanced at or a protest we attended. These things are here, and we often don't understand how they work and what their consequences could be. We have engaged with numerous diverse audiences through the drones and the film, making such work a critical tool for public engagement. They have been on tour for the last 4 years and will continue to do so for 3 more years, moving across countries, screenings, and debates, catalyzing the imagination of thousands of unknown viewers, and hopefully nourishing an appetite for questioning the power of technologies and speculating on their near future potential. Public engagement is critical, but can we also use these methods for augmenting policy decisions? Because when you are making policy changes, you're not just affecting numbers on a graph, these numbers mean something very real. I want to share a project with you we did with the Ministry of Energy and the government of the United Arab Emirates. They invited us to help them shape their energy strategy all the way up to 2050. Based on the government's econometric data, we created this large city model and visualized many different sustainable futures on it. As I was excitably taking a group of government officers and the Prime Minister through one sustainable future scenario on our model, one of them told me, "I can't imagine that people in the future will stop driving cars and start using public transport. In fact, I can't even tell my own son to stop driving his car." But we were prepared for this reaction. Working with scientists in a chemistry lab in my home city in India, we had created approximate samples of what the air would be like in 2030 if our behavior stays the same. And so, I walked the group over to this object that emits vapor from those air samples. Just one whiff of the noxious polluted air from 2030 brought home the point that no amount of data can. This is not the air you would allow your children to breathe. The next day, the government made a big announcement. They would be investing billions of dollars in renewables. We don't know exactly what part our future experiences played in this decision, but we know that they have changed their energy policy to mitigate such a scenario. Through such work, we are learning that one of the most powerful means of affecting change is when people can directly, tangibly, and emotionally experience the future consequences of their decisions and actions today. Let's zoom out further from a specific decision around air pollution to something that's far more complex, like climate change. Looking at data and projections like this, it is hard to imagine the unsurmountable amount of problems we might face. I've found that most people in their everyday lives are at a loss of how to make sense of such graphs. For something quite so complex, Timothy Morton has coined a term, hyperobjects. According to him, we have created things that we can hardly understand, let alone control, let alone make sensible political decisions about. A new word to understand how mind-blowing it is hyperobjects. Hyperobjects are phenomena like radioactive materials and global warming. Hyperobjects stretch our ideas of time and space since they far outlast most human timescales, or they are massively distributed and are so unavailable to immediate experience. At Superflux, we wanted to condense the vast, amorphous form of the climate change hyperobject into something recognizable, tangible, and understandable. One of the things we zoomed in was the implication of climate change on global trade in food. Climate data projections suggest that by 2050, per capita food consumption will go from 32 kilos to 52 kilos, along with increased volatility in price and production, not to mention heavy rainfall events leading to flooding, destroying crops, as well as devastating food stores, assets, and so on. Based on such projections, we explored one possible future where the Western world has moved from abundance to scarcity. We imagined living in a future city with repeated flooding, periods with almost no food in supermarkets, broken supply chains, and economic instabilities. What can we do to not just survive, but prosper in such a world? What food can we eat? To really get inside these questions, we did a ton of live prototyping. We explored the possibility of transforming our homes into spaces for growing food, or food production, gaining knowledge on new and emerging ways of growing food. And so we started building food computers from scratch, using the technique of fogponics, so just using nutrient fog, no water or soil, to grow things really quickly. And we wanted to build them in the cheapest way possible, using salvaged, abandoned, and repurposed materials, turning today's waste into tomorrow's dinner. This is a glimpse of our early experiments with John and our son. And now I'll take you to the final outcome. It's an apartment that people are transported into in around, maybe say 2050 or so, when my son will be around, 6-year-old son will be around my age. At first glance, a seemingly comfortable living space designed for a world of automated living, global trade, and material abundance. But then on closer inspection and realization that the apartment has been adapted to a future it was never meant to inhabit. Discarded newspapers and a radio show reflect the tensions of this new world. A smart panel constantly asks the fridge to refill milk. But where is the milk in this future? Amongst the detritus of now obsolete smart devices and designer goods lives a new reality formed by the impact of climate change. Recipes in the kitchen reflect the change in food production, storage, and consumption. Experimental food production now occupies space once given to relaxation, transforming the apartment into a space for growing and producing food. Resourcefully hacked together IKEA shelves, decorative fog makers, programmable microcontrollers, plumbing supplies, LED lamps, computer fans. Fog oozing out of these contraptions, blinding purple light, the mycelium, droning sounds of water pipes, snares, foxskin, chilies, algae, spirulina, all bearing fruit in the blasted ruins of capitalism. Looking beyond, there lies a city familiar, yet alien. This project was shown at the Center for Contemporary Culture for the last year, and the intention of such a speculative approach with hands-on experimentation is that it offers us the opportunity to very directly step into a familiar space to confront our fears, not to scare or overwhelm, but to help people critically reflect upon their actions in the present and introduce them to potential adaptations for living in such a future. The evidence in the apartment may reflect a different future, but all the food computers were in a completely working condition, no speculation there. Whilst many of us saw this as an early warning, we also wanted to empower people by demonstrating that the potential to rise to the challenges that the future may hold exists today. We've started putting up the recipes of how to build these food stacks on Instructables, and we'll keep doing so in the year to come. We are at a pivotal point in history where we have everything to play for and everything to lose. In times like this, there's a tendency to look towards existing knowledge for answer, to rely exclusively on the rational and the scientific for solutions. But increasingly, it is becoming evident that this is just not driving the wide-scale behavioral change needed to effectively navigate this critical point in our history. I believe that finding ways to directly and viscerally experience different possible futures and future directions is a very important part of the solution for dealing with our current crises. We need to bring the future close enough to feel. We need to engage both the intellect and the emotion, to harness the full power of our innate embodied intelligence. We need to make informed, thoughtful, and nuanced long-term decisions, and most importantly, to act upon them, not just for ourselves, but for our children and grandchildren and the world they will inhabit, so that we can become proud ancestors for the generations to come. I leave you in the hope that together we can find the necessary tools to transform our greatest challenges into our greatest triumphs. We can be remembered as the generation that looked the future square into the eyes and acted upon what it saw. Thank you.